All right, let's talk significant figures. So I'm going to call them Sigfigs for basically the whole video because that's an easy abbreviation for them. Sigfigs just describe how accurate some of the data you took is. So if you took some data and you have everything accurate to the hundreds place, let's say we go some number, some number, some number, and everything is accurate to the hundreds place. Sigfigs, the amount of sigfigs one would use, tells us how accurate this measurement is. So if we went even further back, that would mean even more accurate, this even more accurate, this even more accurate, and you'll find out that the number that I just wrote down here, all the extra numbers I wrote, are increasing the amount of sig figs that number has. So we have this really nice diagram here that actually helps us figure out how many sig figures there are in any given number. So we have the USA here. So if you're European, tough luck. Um, and on the left side of the USA, we have the Pacific. On the right side, we have the Atlantic. And the P and A in Pacific and Atlantic in this case will stand for present and absent. What's present and what's absent? The decimal place in any given number. If there is a decimal place present, you start from the left and move to the right until you hit a number that's not zero. When you start when there is not a decimal, you start from the right and then go to the left until you hit a number that's not zero. Why do we do that? Because let's say we're measuring 100, and if we don't have a decimal place there, then we have to move to this direction because for all we know, 100 could be rounding 97, and then no longer is that accurate. Something like that. And then let's also say, let's put it the other direction and go Pacific, and then we have 0.06. Let's say that we have to start with present, so it has to go this way, and then all of a sudden, okay, there's our number there, and we don't know if that could actually just be a rounding of 0.058. So that's why they start at those specific spots. It minimizes how rounding works. So now let's just have all of these examples and see how many sig figs they are and just plug them into this equation to see how they work. So first one, number one, there is no decimal, so we start from the right. Not that that's a problem because it's a singular number. And we go until we hit a zero. We immediately have one sig fig. 10, there is no decimal, so we start from the right and go until we hit a number that's not zero. We have a zero, so we skip that, one, and then that's it, so we have one. 100, same deal, skip these two zeros, we get one. 101, a bit different. Our first number is a 1. Every number after an initial first number that isn't a 0 counts as a sig fig because no longer is it a rounding. You can't round just the tenths without leaving the 1. So you'll have 1, 2, 3 sig figs here. Here, you have a 0 to start with, and then two other numbers after the 0 that aren't, or it doesn't even matter, just that aren't 0 to begin with. So we have two sig figs. Now, this one, we have a decimal place now. So we're going to start from the left this time. Starts at a 0 and then goes to a 1, that's one sig fig. Starts at a 0, goes to another 0, we hit a 1, that's one sig fig. Starts at a 0, goes to a 0, hits a 1, now we're starting to count sig figs, and then goes to a 0 afterwards. Everything afterwards still counts even if it is a 0, as long as it comes after a whole number. So this has two sig figs. This one, same deal. Ignore, ignore, 1, 2, 3. Ignore, ignore, 1, 2, 3. Okay, same deal here, except now we're going to get fancy with how we place our decimals. So 1, it's still just 1, regardless of whether or not there's a decimal place there, it's still 1. 10 with the decimal point. Well, our thing is present this time. So we start from the left and go to the right. So we go 1, 2, that's 2 sig figs. Notice how a decimal place changes the amount of sig figs there are in the number 10. Now 10.0, start from the left, go to the right, 1, 2, 3, that's 3 sig figs. Because you don't know if this could be a rounding for 9.9. If it's a rounding for 9.9, then you have 10 point or 10.0 if you want to put that one in. So that tells you that we've actually rounded it up to 2 sig figs. Now, let's go some random numbers. 26.4. We start from the left because there's a decimal place present. 1, 2, 3. That's 3 sig figs. Okay, here we go. Start from the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Even though it's a 0, it still counts because it came after some other actual non-zero. And then here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everything counts because it all comes after a whole number. So that is how Sigfigs works. Now, just a note: Sigfigs are only 1 point worth on the AP test. Sometimes they're not worth anything at all. If any doubt, round to 2 sig figs. Most proctors probably would not care very much, but if your teacher is extra insistent on wanting sig figs, that is probably the most in depth you'll get on how sig figs works.